Hi, this is Lisa Runquist, professor of the religious organizations class, and you've done really well. You're now at Unit 7, Church Congregant Issues. Now, so far we've been talking about the church organization and operation and a number of the issues that occur as a result. But this week, our reading is, and the discussion is going to be on lawsuits against the church and working with congregants. There are a lot of things that you need to be aware of. Some of this that you've already talked about, we've reviewed, but there's liability that attaches to the church for actions that are taken on behalf of the church. You normally refer to these people as agents. They can be the directors, they can be the officers, they can be employees, and they can be volunteers. And so it's important to make sure whoever is working on behalf of the church, where the church has determined that they're the ones that are going to be doing something, you need to make sure that you have some sort of control that you're exercising, and that you have a way of determining when someone really is working on behalf of the church and when they're not. There's a case that involved one of my clients a number of years ago where it was an unfortunate situation where a couple members of the church, for some reason, had the child of a third congregant with them, and they went to do ministry at a nursing home. This was done without the church having a clue that it was being done, and while they were there, one of the residents of the nursing home molested the child. And the parents sued the church. It didn't make any sense at all to sue the church, but the insurance company, which represented the church, decided that it was cheaper to settle than to bring the matter to trial, and so that's what they did. And had there been more in the way of policies determining who is a volunteer, who is actually acting for the church and when, and making it clear that if someone is going to be going out and ministering by themselves without the church being involved, that was not an action of the church, because there wasn't anything that really set that out. There was the insurance company just decided it was cheaper to settle, and although the church could have said, no, we're not settling, but then that it would be up to them to provide the defense, and that's an expensive proposition. So it is important to be aware of who's acting on your behalf that you don't know about, and make it clear, no, you're not acting on our behalf unless you're part of this particular program. Premises liability. There's reading about that, and I'm not going to go into detail, but there are just a couple points I'd want to make with regard to that. And the first is, if you're aware that there's a potential problem, you need to take care of it. For example, if there's an attractive nuisance that the kids like to play on, take care of it before a child gets injured. If there's a step that's broken, fix it. Anything like that, if you know there's a problem and you haven't fixed it, then clearly there's going to be liability on your behalf. If it's not obvious, then it may be that you'll be able to at least share the responsibility with whoever got injured. But when you know that there's a problem, you really need to make sure that it's taken care of. The other thing is with regard to insurance coverage. Insurance companies exist to make money, and as a result, they often exclude certain things that you wouldn't necessarily think about. One problem that I've seen with some insurance policies is they exclude the members from coverage, because they say, well, no, you are the members, and so the members of the church are not covered by the insurance that you got to cover them, because most of the people who are going to be attending the church events are the members, not necessarily someone who's a third party who has no connection. So make sure that your insurance coverage covers everyone who's going to be on the premises, including the church congregants, the church members. Then the next thing that I just want to talk about briefly is, we've talked about it before, but let's talk about it again: child sexual abuse. This is something that is the law regarding what reporting has to be done is on a state-by-state basis, and that's one of your assignments that you're going to be working on, is figuring out what the law is. But apart from that, you really need to make sure that you've put into effect a method of having background checks for anyone who is working with children on behalf of the church, and that you put in policies to make sure that you don't have people alone with a child in a situation where they could be accused, rightly or wrongly, of child sexual abuse. That's probably the biggest area that churches today are being sued about, is the child sexual abuse. So make sure that you've put into whatever policies you need, and actually enforce them to make sure that you've done everything you can to protect the church and your children from such abuse. Now, moving on to the question of pastoral counseling. This is something that, again, we have another case, the Nally versus Grace Community Church. Really interesting case. And the question really is, what are you going to do when you look at this and set up policies for your church as to how this is actually going to work? Are you going to have counseling? Who are you going to counsel? Most of the churches that I work with, I suggest that they counsel only the people who are the congregants. You don't counsel people just who walk in off the street, and that you have a method of resolving disputes if they arise, and that person, before they receive counseling, agrees to participate in that method of resolution of disputes rather than suing if they have a problem. In addition, pastoral counseling should be dealing with spiritual matters. If you have a situation where someone really needs professional counseling, then you should refer them out. You shouldn't try and cover everything yourself. There's a reason why there are people who have special training, and use them. Try and find someone, if you can, that has your types of your religious beliefs, so that you can refer them to them. But one way or another, you can't try and do everything yourself, solve all the problems of the congregation yourself. And in fact, the Grace Community Church did this. They did that. It was quite interesting to look at how this one case came against a church that was very well prepared, and the church won, but you need to then look and say, well, what did they do, and what can we do to make sure we don't get into trouble with providing any spiritual counseling. Now, along with that is the pastor penitent privilege. That's a huge issue that, again, there are differences in state law as to how far this pastor penitent privilege goes, but you want to make sure that you're aware of what the law is, and what it does is it allows people to receive absolution. You know, it came from it started with the Catholic Church, where people went to confession, and it was determined that yes, the priests should not have to let anyone know of anything that they hear in confession, and that's a carried on so that it's not just available to churches, but or to the Catholic Church, but to any church. And you need to determine again whether you're going to require people who are providing this pastor penitent or counseling, if they're pastors, are they ministers that you have ordained, licensed, or commissioned, or are they in some other position? And if they're not ordained, licensed, and commissioned, what are you going to do to make sure that they're covered by the pastor penitent privilege? What position does your church take as to why this person is a spiritual counselor? With regard to child sex abuse, pastors may or may not have to report that. And you need to look at it. For example, if the pastor is also a teacher, they may be required as a teacher to report such child abuse, however they find it. In other situations, pastors may have to report child abuse when they find out about it, except in a confidential communication that would be the pastor penitent privilege. So that's one of your other assignments today, is to actually research what the law is, or this week is to research what the law is for your state and determine how your church actually functions in this area. The final area that I just want to mention today is church discipline. It's another area that you want to be careful of. Yes, you have the right to determine who your members are, just as you have a right to determine who your ministers are. But you don't want to be in a situation where you're violating someone's right to privacy in a way that will cause a lawsuit to come back against you. So that's another thing that you get to read and look at today, and determine how this is going to be put into place in your church. How is the church operating now, and are there any changes that they should make to protect themselves? So it's been a pleasure working with you. I hope you have enjoyed this class, and we agree that you're going to be able to go forward from here and actually make a difference.